Resolve your immigrant's missing ship record? Well, hopefully you may solve some mysteries after you learn about the certificates of arrival and registry that we will cover in this video. What immigrant group will I cover? Well, the immigrants I'm concentrating on arrived in the United States from 1906 to 1924, and these people submitted their U.S. citizenship petitions from March 1929 to the early 1940s. Many waited years, if not decades, after entering the U.S. to start their naturalization process. Why did they wait so long? What caused them to start? There was an upsurge in applications during the late 1930s to early 1940s. One major reason was that war broke out in Europe on September 3, 1939, and in the United States there was not a good time to be an alien. We see this headline in the New York Times about 2 weeks after war was declared. But even if you don't know the exact 20th century year when your immigrant arrived or applied for citizenship, or you are having trouble finding their arrival information using online passenger indexes, the information in this video might help solve part of their arrival information. Here are some resources to possibly find when people may have arrived in the U.S. and when they became naturalized. NARA is the National Archives and Records Administration. You can read some resources there. Let's look further about the U.S. Census. These U.S. censuses asked the respondent about immigration and naturalization years. There are other censuses, such as the New York State Census for 1915 and 1925, that has information also on immigration and naturalization. The 1950 federal census is the last census to become public. You'll have to wait till 2032 to see the 1960 federal one. So let's look at some naturalization checks. Let's start with defining some naturalization forms. First, the Certificate of Arrival, which I will abbreviate as C/A. It certifies to the Naturalization Court that a candidate for U.S. naturalization legally entered the country on the date, convenience, usually a ship, and port shown on their application by checking the original records, by checking the manifests. Here's an example of such a certificate. Notice the top says, for use of alien arriving in the United States after June 29, 1906, and that the CA to be issued immediately prior to petitioning for naturalization. In March 1929, the CA was issued before the declaration. So let's kind of zoom in here, see some of the information. This shows the name of the immigrant and when, where, and how they entered the U.S. Someone checked the manifest and did a sign-off that that person indeed came on that date. If this CA definition is accurate, then why do researchers of some immigrants with CAs have difficulty finding them? They usually find them, though, on their reference ship manifest. Perhaps it's because of poor handwriting, transcription errors, or reversal of last and first names on the manifest compared to what is shown on the CA. But there are some immigrants with CAs that cannot be found on their reference ship manifest. I will provide an answer, if not a solution, for many of those missing travelers. Note that if the immigrant's arrival was before June 29, 1906, no CA was required, which sometimes leads to misleading and inaccurate arrival information on the applicant's naturalization documents. You always should look at the date when the person submitted the naturalization documents. So Lewis Cohen will be my major example. He has some memorable entry documents. He's not, by the way, a relative of mine. Immigrant Lewis Cohen has a 1942 CA for a ship he shouldn't have arrived on. It's a special case as shown on his certificate of arrival. You will see such CAs for other immigrants that can't be found on their expected entry methods, like ships, steamers, railroads, etc. See a bunch of examples like that. He applied for citizenship in Cleveland, Ohio. This is his petition. He shows that he was born in 1834. And I looked at that and I thought, that can't be right. That's an error, as I found him on the 1940 census as being born actually 50 years later, 1884, as you can see. So you can see here it says he was born in 1834. But actually this census in 1940 shows on the bottom line that he's 56 years old. He's not 86 years old or even 106 years old. So here's the bottom part, and I'll read to you this. He says, my last place of foreign residence was Manchester, England. I came to the United States from Liverpool, England. My lawful entry was New York, New York, under the name of Louis Philip Kutcher, now Lewis Cohen. February 12, 1907, the SS Titanic. When I presented this to a live audience, there was laughter, but it's not as simple as that. First, the point of departure is different. Second, the Titanic sank on a different month, day, and year. So here we have from an AI overview on Google, the Titanic's port of departure was Southampton. It was a maiden voyage. It left Southampton on April 10th, 1912. It also stopped in Cherbourg, France, and Queenstown Island. Then, as some of you may know, the Titanic was a British passenger liner that sank on April 15th, 1912, after striking an iceberg. So not only does he have how he came from England, but he also has the date, the year, the month, all wrong. But the infamous Titanic wasn't the first ship to have that name, believe it or not. There was a freighter called the Titanic that under that name operated from 1888 through 1903, when it was sold and renamed the Luis Alberto, was sold for a South American concern. It did visit, according to this Morse site of ship lists, and I show you a reference there. I'll probably put that in the show notes. It did go to New York in the 1890s, but the 1890 manifest I could not find with a link shown. However, if you look at it, 1895, 1896, there is a manifest from it. The 1912, by the way, manifest of the Titanic should be missing, as it went down with the ship. So there's quite a year difference here. Even if he was on that first Titanic, it is off by, 11 years? That's crazy. I doubt Lewis was on the early ship, and the search for him on their manifests under Kutcher yielded no results. I could not find him there. And he's not on the Titanic. I'm showing you his certificate of arrival, but I'm hiding from you an important part of it that I'll show you in a second. Note that he applied for naturalization probably in 1942. So this was a number of years later. He probably didn't remember what ship he came on. Here's what he shows on his U.S. Census for his arrival year. So his certificate of arrival showing arrival in 1907 isn't that far out of line. Still quite distance away from the real Titanic. What do I speculate about him? He might have thought he came on a similar sounding ship name, but he probably did it out of poor memory, and certainly not for fraudulent purposes, because there's nothing I can find that all of a sudden he would say, I'm a survivor of the Titanic. But there's more to his record, a lot more. And that's about registry. And let's talk about immigrant registry. So here is what I withheld from you, and I'm going to open that up. Stamped on the certificate of arrival is Certificate of Registry issued. Also note in the upper right that there is an R, the letter R, in the number of the Certificate of Arrival. So the Certificate of Arrival is acting as a placeholder for the more important, in my view, the more important Certificate of Registry. Now, before we talk about what that means, we'll find out how often you will see that. Apparently, the immigration authorities could not verify any of his initial arrival information. So when he applied for registry, which we will discuss, the authorities probably didn't care that he put an improbable ship name down. They mainly wanted to establish a U.S. entry date for his Certificate of Registry, his CR form. How often would you expect to see these CA-CR situations? I looked at a sample of something over 500 petitions from Ohio and Tampa, Florida, in the late 1930s, 1940s, and their CAs from the National Archives catalog. And I only saw 12 such records, or about 2%. So 1 out of 50 of these petitions had the CACRs. On the other hand, I found a message online that said about 250,000 of these were issued, so it's not a small number. There's a number of these CACR documents in the National Archives catalog. And I'm showing you where the catalog is. That's the address of it. And again, I'll probably repeat all the cited sources in the show notes. So let's look at some of the Certificate of Arrival stamped Certificate of Registry issued. Here's a person who came on the SS Unknown, in New York. Couldn't remember. Came in 1913. The Certificate of Arrival issued in 1939. Here's one that he says he walked over the border from Canada to the U.S. in Minnesota, in the northwest corner of Minnesota. You know how cold the temperature is there? In December, it can get to minus 0.8 degrees Fahrenheit. That's crazy. Here's a person who said he came in April of 1915 on a ferry boat and probably didn't go through immigration process at all. Came on a ferry boat. Here's a person, again, Canada, U.S., or to the border. He came on a railroad on September 1921. Here's a person who came on a livery carriage. I had to look that up. It refers to a horse-drawn carriage available for hire, often for tours of transportation. Now, I'm going to do more with the 2 New York Port of Entry immigrants plus Lewis Cohen later. Because we do see things like this. We do see on the Certificate of Arrival a real name of a ship. But you're not going to find that person on that ship manifest, at least under that name. You're not going to find them. So let's look at the March 1929 registry law and find out what that was all about. The U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services has a very useful overview of registry files and how to get copies of the file. And I'm not going to repeat a lot of what's in here. I'm going to show you the address for it on the show notes. So let's read from that website. It says registry files document the creation of official immigrant arrival records. So again, they create something that didn't exist. At least the documents didn't exist. Document the creation of official immigrant arrival records under the Registry Act of March 2nd, 1929. The Registry Act applied to persons who entered the United States prior to July 1st, 1924. That was an amended year, by the way, and for whom no arrival record could later be found. So they're going to create one. Because the registry program required applicants to document their arrival and subsequent residence in the country, how are they going to do that? Registry files often contain significant biographical information about the immigrant. Press the next slide too fast. So here's continuation of this. This original registry provision required the alien to show the following. The alien entered the U.S. prior to June 3rd, 1921, and that was amended to 1924. The alien has continuously resided in the U.S. since entry. Show you how they could do that, how to establish that. The alien is a person of good moral character, and the alien is not subject to deportation for some really severe crime or fraudulent activity. The law further stated that for purposes of U.S. immigration and naturalization laws, an alien for whom a registry record has been made shall be considered to have been lawfully admitted for permanent resident as of the entry date. So here's an alien without this registry law, who couldn't prove how he entered the U.S. Now he could say, hey, I entered the U.S. under this registry law. Another statement from Burlington Daily News in 1937. Again, to emphasize this, the Certificate of Registry legalizes your residence in this country and enables you to apply for your first papers. That's the declaration that goes before the petition. The March 1929 Naturalization Immigration Law changed when the CA was required, as I mentioned earlier, from the petition to the filing of the declaration. There may be a number of reasons why an immigrant chooses the registry path. They may have illegally entered the U.S., bypassed the immigration process. They didn't remember how they came. Their certificate of arrival was originally rejected. They didn't match what they said, the manifest and their preliminary application. They entered under another name. They wanted to start a new life and start over with a new name. And here, it was too good to just not show you. This is from a Connecticut newspaper in 1929, which was talking about the Canada-U.S. porous border. And so some of these people may have entered as visitors or students, found employment here and decided to remain. Those who, through laxity of officials, either did not receive proper certificates or are unable to find them. And another group, to save money, it cost money to go across the border, came in on a visitor's certificate, which was cheaper, but it tended to remain here. And so effectively they did a white lie there. Another statement that registry can be viewed as a form of amnesty for long-term unauthorized residents of the United States. It said it could take up to 6 months to obtain a certificate of registry. Although the USCIS, this website, has a web page on registry file images, which is shown here, it actually is a description of the type of material that could be in a file. Disappointed in that. I wanted to show you some examples. So the registry file may contain all of these things and more. I'll show you another slide of this. Biographical information, employment dates to establish they were in the U.S. for a continuous period of time, reference letters, financial records, police or criminal background checks, school records, rental agreements, photos, case histories, how they traveled to the United States, etc. And it may be more than that. Very useful for family history research if your immigrant went that route. So let me show you another example to illustrate the process. Again, not a relative of mine. This is a person by the name of Hyman Zaks. And Hyman Zaks submitted in 1928, before the registry law passed, this declaration of intention. There was no CA required on the declaration, remember. He states, and let's see, it's on the bottom, he states he came by railroad into the United States from, he went to Niagara Falls, Canada, and he crossed by the Canadian Pacific Railroad. It is unlikely he went through immigration inspection. It's also unlikely he could have gotten a certificate of arrival based on this. He couldn't prove it. And then on the bottom, he indicates the material there, and he wants to become a citizen. They probably would have denied it because they could not prove that he crossed the border on the railroad. Okay. And then what happened was he got a certificate of registry. Now, I don't know if this is the official, it's an official card that he was given. Give you the dimensions of it. Got this on an online auction site. These are rare today. Haven't seen another one of these. The 239177 number on the upper right, and we'll look at it in more detail, is the certificate of arrival number. The number 11472 is no, I don't think that's a registry number per se. That's some sort of administrative number of that, and we're going to see another number as well. So there's lots of numbers here. What you need, the registry number to get the file. Now, if we look closer to this, and I'm going to blow this up, his registry number is 11675. And somehow they stamped on it CA issued. So it's not clear exactly how this played a role in the CA issuing. It's obvious that they were connected. On the back of this, here are his information that he would carry around with him. You see that the date of registry is 1930. The record of registry, that is not the number of his file. So you're going to see a lot of numbers here. You need the registry number. If you don't, you're going to have to do a double search. First, they search to get the number, and then a search to get the file. So this is an early process of Hyman Zaks. And so when he did a petition for citizenship, they put on his number up there the letter R, indicating it was a registry. And on there, it also gave the number of the certificate of arrival. Now note, there's no stamp here about certificate of registry issued. That was a surprise. I explained that by saying this was an early use of the registry law, because this was issued in 1930. It's a warning not to assume, if the stamp line is missing, that this is not a CR situation. It is a registry situation. To emphasize that, there's no stamp here stating certificate of registry issued or an R in the number. So how do you go about finding if your ancestor had a registry file and where to get the file? Well, how to get the file, that's in the U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services website. But I want to discuss the T621, which is one way of doing this, and somebody the name of Marion Smith, and a discussion that we had on a website called History Hub. This is from the National Archives. It is a website where you can ask questions in a number of areas about the U.S. government, and the staff at the National Archive will answer them, and so will the community of volunteers. I answer questions, queries about census and immigration and naturalization, and there are a number of people who are very good researchers who will answer your questions. This particular question was someone asking about his grandfather's declaration of intent. And Marion Smith, a retired historian for the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service, answered it, and said in this discussion, and I'm going to show you the address. She says, I think the key may be in your original question where you say you have in your possession a certificate of registry. So this is what Marion says. One more thing regarding searches of passenger lists online for a passenger whose naturalization records provide an exact port, date, ship, but that passenger cannot be found. Sounds familiar? Try searching NARA microfilm publication T621, Index Soundex to passenger lists of vessels arriving at New York, July 1st, 1902 to 1943. Now let me point out that the statistics tend to show that 70% of immigrants coming to the U.S. went through New York, went through Ellis Island. This index should contain a different kind of index card for all those issued certificates of registry based on a claimed arrival at New York between 1906 and 1921-24. So the CACRs I showed you before, in which people said they crossed the Canadian border, they probably wouldn't be found in the New York index. So, in order to paraphrase Smith, you're wasting your time looking for that person's entry manifest if they show a certificate of registry. The card may not provide the registry file number. Usually they show, this is from Marion, usually they show a CR number, but at least they tell you to abandon the passenger list and switch to a search for a registry file. And she continues, see if you can acquire their registry files, although you might need a double search if you don't have their registry number. First search finding the R number, and then the second search the registry file. And there's unfortunately going to be a fee for both searches. There's another applicable immigration discussion on History Hub, including Marion Smith, that I'm showing you there. So let's look at NARA T621, which has been scanned by FamilySearch.org. Now, FamilySearch.org is a site that registration is required, but it's free. Even though it's associated with the Latter-day Saints, it's not a religious site. So to use FamilySearch, remember about probably 70% of immigrants might fall in this index. We'll show you how to use it. I'll show you how to use it. Here is the address. Again, I'll repeat that in the show notes. We will find the T621. There are a lot of pages here, 771 images. It's going to start on page 12. Now, all this is going to make sense when you actually go to it. And it's a difficult thing to search, as you will find out, and I'll hopefully reduce your learning curve. Now, the T621 is from the Works Progress Administration during the Depression. In 1938 to 1943, the WPA workers transcribed index cards from the Ellis Island manifests. And there were two series, an 1897 to 1902 series with a different number, and what we are concerned with here, the 1902 to 1943. Now, T621 is really a great index. It's an index of people arriving at Ellis Island. As far as I know, it has never been transcribed and put online. So this is actually an index of passenger indexes which may be more accurate than what people have done since then. The index from FamilySearch and the index from Ancestry for incoming passengers in New York. In the summer 2001, Gary Mokotov said that every evidence is that the accuracy of surnames on the microfilm, the WPA, index is considerably superior to the accuracy of surnames on the Ellis Island database. And the actual cards are no longer in existence. We rely on the microfilm. Why is it better? Because they were transcribed directly from the manifest, avoiding problems with legibility. The Ellis Island manifests were destroyed in the 1940s. We only have scans of them. And then they were New York-based people in the Depression that were doing it, and they were more familiar with European names and handwriting. As to T621, including registry immigrants as well as New York immigrant arrival names, not exactly sure, but apparently when a certificate of registry was issued, the information was forwarded to the immigration office of the state at entry port for their passenger index. And it looks like that list was integrated, the registry list, was integrated with the manifest passenger lists, and then they were scanned together. It is possible other ports' passenger indexes might also contain registry clues. Don't give up on that. This raises an interesting question. FamilySearch's Ellis Island name database, that's online, it's a subscription service. And I'm sorry, it's not a subscription service. I'm reading ahead of myself. That's a registration required, but it's free. And also Ancestry.org, which is a subscription service, I believe are only based on ship manifests. Doesn't have the registry cards. But the New York T621 index cards also include registry information. Thus, if you can't find someone on the online passenger indexes, use T621 for a better finding aid, and also to see if your immigrant used the registry process. So here's T621 on FamilySearch. It covers 1902 to 1943. There are 744 roles. How are you going to find your particular person? And they use Soundex to find them. This is from the Archives, a definition of Soundex. The Soundex is a coded surname, last name, index based on the way a surname sounds rather than the way it is spelled. Surnames that sound the same but are spelled differently, like Smith and Smythe, have the same code and are filed together. The Soundex coding system was developed so that you can find a surname even though it may have been recorded under various spellings. And this was a very important part of genealogy searches earlier, and it's embedded in a lot of index codes today. So let me show you. Let's do an example. Here is Christo Papakostas. We're going to find him in the New York T621. See, he arrived in 1916 on a real ship, he claims, the SS Patria. And then he, in 1937, tried to become a citizen, and they issued the Certificate of Arrival, Certificate of Registry issued. First of all, we need to figure out his Soundex code. So I go to the Steve Morse one-step site. He has generating Soundex codes. There are different areas. We want the American Soundex code. We enter Papakostas and we get a code of P122. The P is the first letter of the surname, and 122 is an algorithm. So now we have P122. Then we go to FamilySearch. We go to the website. There are a lot of different publications here. We want the T621s, which start on page 12. So don't get lost there. We're looking for T621. There's lots of things here. And when we go to P6, we go to the index itself. There's lots of these Soundex numbers. We eventually arrive in something that says P100 to P122, P122 to P140. We're looking for P122. Now, P122 says on the top line HRYE. What is HRYE? HRYE is the first name of the person, and it will show you the first and last name of each role. So the first name of roll 503 in P100 is Marguerite. The last first name of P122 is HRYE. So that's what we want. We want rolls 503. That's where Christoph should be. We want to get to the P122s, because you see there's going to be a lot of P's in there to figure it out, and we can get there. Okay. Now, roll 503 has something like 22,000 images. So how are we going to find it? After each one of my image number choices, so I'm going to enter a number and then see where I am, I look at the cards before and after that image to see what image number to look for next to figure out how to get there. So the first thing I do is I say, let me see image 10,000. And then I look back and forward and I say, well, guessing, let me look at image 4,000. Then let me look at image 3,500. No, that's too low. 3,700, 3,900. I'm close. So now I will go single images up to 3,914. And eventually I will find image 3,914 of 21,978. And there is Christ Papakostas, a CR number. A CR number. There's no date here. How they came? Just that they got a certificate of registry, and you can assume they submitted their petition in 1929 or more recent. That is not a registry number. Marion Smith pointed that out, but it does say that he went through registry. What about, here's another one, Stanislav Okanowitz. He came through the port of entry of New York, even though he doesn't know the steamer. Does he have a card? Yes, he does. And in fact, again, it's a CR number. He is gone through registry, and it at least says February 13th up there. So that is probably something that refers to the certificate of arrival. And then here's our famous Louis Philip Kutcher. Again, a CR number. It's interesting they put down the SS Titanic there. The 2/12/1884, that's a correct date of his birth. And you might think, oh, he was on the Titanic. No, he's not on the Titanic. This is a registry card that's buried within the manifest cards. Now, one thing, the T621 sequences of images is not intuitive. It has to be explained. And let me show you. This is what you're going to see. We are going to do a search for Weintraubs. That's what we're going to look for. And I find out by looking through this that image 16105 is the start of the Weintraubs. It's Abe Weintraub. So my question then is, what do you expect in 16106? These numbers were put there by ancestry. There are no stamped numbers on the card that there's number card 16105. These are strictly for indexing the images. Okay, I want to be clear. So you kind of expect that if you have a 16105 and a 16106, they're in sequence. That's not what happens. 16105 is Abe Weintraub. 16106 is Gottfried Weissar. 16107 is Abram Weintraub. 16108 is Frederick Weissar. Now, two things you should note here, because it's even more complicated. Not only there's an alteration here of a name and a Soundex code. You can see 536-260, 536-260. But the Weintraub first names are going up the alphabet. Abe, and then Abram, and then Avron perhaps. But the Weishaups are going down the alphabet. Gottfried, Friedrich, G, F, maybe E, etc. So there are two different sequences here. There's a sequence of names that alternate, and in fact, one is going up the alphabet and one is going down. How did that happen? Well, this is what the film actually looks like. This is a scan of the film. The film is 16 millimeters. The cards go up one side and then take a U-turn and come back upside down the other side. And by the way, this is also a warning that you want to note here that the first sequence of images on FamilySearch film version may look correct due to the unmatched number on the original film sides. So the first ones, there's nothing on the other side, so they look correct. But then you get to here, and then you have problems here. So here is a view of what the film looks like that we're looking at. The Weintraubs are on the right, Abe, Abram, Adolf. The Weishaups are on the left, coming back again, upside down, and that's the reason why we have that sequence. And therefore, the numbers were put this way. Instead of filming it on one side and then the other, it looks like they filmed it on both sides, did a lot of software here, reversed the cards to do it this way. If your Soundex number occurs at the end of the film, where the sequence makes a U-turn, you may see the starting letters of the first name of your Soundex number both increasing and decreasing along the alphabet. In other words, the Soundex is the same, but it's made the U-turn, and now it's even more confusing. So I hope that this video about resolving your immigrant's missing ship record using Certificate of Arrival, Certificate of Registry helps some of you to get a handle on why you cannot find people on ship manifests. This is another of my JDW talks. I have YouTube talks on genealogy topics, census resources, Ellis Island immigration and naturalization. About half of the 100+ are in those topics. The others are natural history topics. I'm a field biologist, virtual birding field trips, birding optics, and California birds. And also novelty zithers, biology songs, and IKEA daybed disassembly. So if you like this, please subscribe. Take a look at past YouTube videos and get to work. Get to work to see if your mystery people have gone through the registry process. Bye-bye.